Start Reverse is how to engage employees to transform your business into customer experiences. Now, you're listening to World Chef's podcast. I'm your host, Ragnar. This is World on a Plate. And today, we have the privilege to welcome André Wiringa, who is the founder of Start Reverse and author of a book with the same name. André is a strategy consultant that works with senior business leaders on reverse leadership. You will know more about this soon. Himself has a hospitality background, has worked with major hospitality brands you would know, Hilton, Marriott, Accor, Radisson, Dubai airports, Saudi airports, just to name a very few, and helped a few of them to obtain award-winning customer experiences. So exclusively on World on a Plate, he will share some of his secrets and give us some of the keys to successful leadership. So welcome on the show, André. Great to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you, Ragnar, and great to be here. Very exciting.
Honored to have you. And it was a great chat we had at the Olympics, the Culinary Olympics in Stuttgart the other day. That was an exciting event.
Super impressive. Well done.
Yeah, no, thank you, and thank you for coming on the show. And even I can even give people some sneak peek view into what's happening at the Congress in Singapore in October, because you're going to be there with us as well, and you're going to be a keynote speaker and also opportunity to speak to some of the younger chefs who are starting off in their career. So that's going to be a great event, and this is why I'm so happy to have you here on the podcast to give us a little bit of taste of what we can expect in Singapore.
Awesome, excellent.
Hey, so I mentioned in my introduction, you are the founder of Start Reverse. So within that company, you are the chief reverse engineer. Now tell us, what is a reverse engineer? How did this journey start for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's two questions, right? So
yeah, how did you become a reverse engineer? Tell us first, how did the journey start for you? Tell us that first, and then
yeah, I like that. It really started by being a fan of like a couple of game-changing brands. If you look at Nespresso, if you look at Starbucks, if you look at Tesla, I mean, and before that, I worked with Nike, and believe it or not, Nokia at the time was super reverse. I mean, the first Nokia flagship stores were designed by 18 corporates from New York who now do the Apple stores. And working with those brands, I could see how important it is to really think in reverse, think of the experience you want to create first, and then you work your way back to where you are today. So that's what reverse engineering is. And we made it into an approach that starts with a dream. So what is your dream? And how can you turn that into a narrative? For instance, starting with what's your purpose? What is the identity you want to build? What is the experience you want to have as a brand, as a team, or as a leader? And then basically design the journey, how to bring this dream to life. That was really, I think, grown organically. The blueprint methodology, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, we started to really simplify the brand messages. Sometimes you have brand experts who had like a super complex approach to brands, personas, identity, brand values. And I've been a waiter. I worked in kitchens. I wanted to simplify that process and say, guys, we need to empower everybody working in a kitchen, in a restaurant, in a hotel to understand what we actually want this brand to do and to be. And how can I contribute as a coworker? So hence the blueprint approach, which is really the essence of reverse engineering.
Right. So that is sort of the essence of Start Reverse. And so what is the approach? So how do you like, if you mentioned you were a waiter, you worked in hotels and later in the marketing of hotels. How do you what is the approach, and how do you apply that to the hospitality industry? Where do people start?
Yeah, I think it starts with a dream, that you really are gutsy enough as leadership team or as entrepreneur. If you start your own restaurant, what's the dream? What's the purpose? Why would people come to your place?
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, as an example. So take a restaurant or. If you give
Yeah.
an example.
So why your restaurant and not one of the millions of others?
Yeah.
And we'll be together in October in Singapore. And Singapore has amazing restaurants. So if you start a new place, why you? I think that's where it starts. And then your second question is, how do we want to be basically experienced? What is the identity we want to build? And if you take those three, that's already the starting point of your blueprint. That's a dream that you have as an entrepreneur or that you have as a team. Then, of course, you want your team members to be part of how do we bring that to life? So that's where I would start. Give them, maybe you cannot give them the keys to bring it to life without setting them up for success. So you need to immerse them, you need to empower them. Because else it's unfair, right? If you empower people without setting them up for success, it's going to be a nightmare probably waiting to happen.
Right. So it's really, in a nutshell, it's about and particularly valuable for hospitality is to have the people that work for you, the front of desk, how to say, or like everybody in the organization has a buys into what is your purpose of being as a company. Right.
Totally right. We always say people are the experience and the experience is the marketing. And what we mean by that is when you select a new restaurant, you look at reviews from others, complete strangers. You don't trust the website of the restaurant. You want to know what others say about their experience. And your experience is determined by, your loyalty, the question if you're coming back or not will be determined by your own experience. And again, if you're having a great experience, you write a review. And if it's really shitty, you'll probably write a review as well. So in that sense, if you think then one step back, you reverse, the review is a result of an experience. The experience is the result of people work. And yes, we could argue, of course, the creativity in the kitchen is super important in terms of how it gets to the plate. But at the end of the day, it's really only people work. So a chef is super dependent on his or her team to make magic really happen. And then if you look at the front side, the interaction with guests, how we receive them, all the way maybe to the website. It at the end of the day, it's all people work.
Yeah. And I mean, I got your book, so you left me your book when we met the other day, and I've been sort of browsing through it, and it's a great book, so I recommend it. So we'll put a link to the book on our podcast channel. So I recommend people to have a look because it's a really interesting. It simplifies a lot of the things that maybe that you're telling us now might be a little bit intangible, but really when you see the examples, it really comes to life, and I think and that's what you do as well in the book. It's quite an innovative book in a sense, the way that it's structured.
Thank you.
Tell us more about the book and how people can use it.
Yes, I wrote it with the reverse perspective, of course. And I have two versions. One is the travel edition, but the initial table version actually has two sides. So you decide. That's where already the reverse. Yes. So you decide if you want to read the novel, which is a 1 hour read, or if you want to have more like the textbook version, pseudo-academic. I'm not native English, so that's why it's probably accessible to read than if it would be a native English writer. It's color-coded, so you can actually easily see what is where, and it takes you from why does customer experience matter, who are game changers, what's the power of really having an appealing, in this case, purpose and a compelling identity, and then why think reverse, and that leads then to, okay, if you get all that, how can I make my own blueprints? So the blue chapter in the book is actually explaining, you put it all together, because if you want, you can simply browse the book, you can explore a little bit deeper, but you can also use it to make your own blueprints. So there are a lot of sections where you can actually make your own notes. And then there are cases, you can skip them or not. So I didn't want to write a book that has only one way to read, because I think there's so many boring books that I think like, oh my God, this is like a lot of time. I'm never going to start. So thanks for asking. It was a lot of fun writing it.
Yeah. What strikes me is I think well, the starting point when you start reverse, well, it's starting at the end, and well, what strikes me is also what you mentioned is that the illusion that sometimes top management level has of what is the purpose of the whole company. So if they don't even understand what the end experience is, how are they gonna motivate the people, empower the people to deliver?
Yeah, and that's important. I think a founder generally has a good idea, but we sometimes, even with founders, have heated discussions. I'm not going to mention the brands, but we recently had a very cool hospitality brand, and the top six said, we don't need to talk about purpose. We got that covered. I said, okay, that's good. So cool. Are you okay? We just spent 5 minutes. I split you in two teams of three, and in each team, just write down how would you define the purpose in keywords? And both teams took at least 1.5 hours to agree amongst the three of them, and then had two completely different purposes. So this is where and I like your question, is where you could actually be very disillusioned if you think, why is the team not living their purpose? Well, because you're not articulate enough in telling them, what do you expect? What do you want your guests to experience? Or one step back, what do you want your team to experience? Because if I want my team to be, or if I want my guests to be surprised, as just an example, like one of the experiences could be, I'm surprised, I'm overwhelmed, or I think this is super creative, then that's something your team needs to experience as well, because it's very hard to pass on an experience which I'm not getting myself.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. And I mean, and you you used the word experience a lot, and I think maybe this is maybe where your hospitality background maybe also is a nice learning school for teaching brands that deal in goods, because in hospitality, and sometimes maybe even big brands in hospitality forget that they are not dealing in goods, they are dealing in experiences and feelings. So
Totally.
yeah.
And I think Wiringa, who wrote the book Unreasonable Hospitality, he got it right. And he said, it's not a question, are we in the hospitality business serving people? No, we're in the people business. And by the way, we're providing hospitality. And I think there are so many other sectors in that people business, be it retail, be it automotive, be it aviation, be it consumer banking, telecom, and you can go on. So that's why I think we're privileged, Ragnar, you and I, and let's say all your members of the World Chefs Association. We are in a very unique industry where we're really desired by many other industries, and we need to play that card more often because we have something unique that other industries are craving for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is the that mentality of what you mean is the experience, providing experiences, and
Totally.
yeah, and so from there, so how do you work with team when you find that in your sample there people had a completely different idea of what the purpose is? So is the first step is the most important one in the journey to work reverse? So how do you sort of get everybody together, and what are the steps to come to a situation where people can be really empowered in delivering that purpose?
So we have a 5D approach, which I describe in the book as well, whereby the first D is the dream phase. And to your question, ideally, and it depends on how big the operation is. If you have a single restaurant, I would encourage you, and even if you have like 20 people, involve everybody in the dream phase, because you could know what the purpose is, but how cool is it if you let your team detect that purpose as well? If the more they create themselves, the more ownership you build. So if you have like you have a chain, we work for La Panco DJM, for instance, with 250 restaurants, then of course you need to have maybe a couple of sessions where you talk about, so what is our purpose? As an example, founder Alain Coumont in Brussels was really seeing an issue where people are getting more and more lonely at an earlier age, which is why he actually started Le Pain Quotidien with a big communal table. The first restaurant had just one table. And the reason was not that he wanted to provide just good food. He wanted to provide good food that does good for good people, one neighborhood at a time, but with the purpose to create meaningful connections. So I think, again, purpose was driving the what and the how. So that's where I think as a founder or as a chef or as a restaurant manager, you need to start by defining, of course, what do you see as purpose, but how do you get your team on board? And then if you're in that same first session, you can agree on one identity. Part of the dream is also, if we're 20 or 20,000, what is the identity we all share? Like, for instance, at KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, 30,000 staff, everybody is a pioneer, aviation pioneer. Adidas, we're all coaches, and that's super cool. At Le Pain Quotidien, we're all hosts. So if you find one Virgil job title that brings everybody together, so it creates community, it creates unity, it sort of steers behavior, and it helps you to bring your purpose to life. And I think that's already two very important elements. And instead of telling the team, hey guys, this is how I want, let's say, every guest to experience us, how about turning that around and agreeing, aligning on purpose and identity, and then have a session with the team. So how do we want to be experienced? Which starts by asking the question, what reviews do we want to have? If you go back in our podcast,
right.
We talked about experiences to marketing. Reviews these days are instrumental. And some chefs would still maybe deny it, but they're there. I mean, you cannot maybe agree always, but they're there. So I would always suggest use them and then start by defining what do we want guests to write up? Because the write-up is a result of the experience.
That's right.
And if you have your team defining those experiences, for instance, I feel inspired, or it could be if you have a healthy concept, I feel energized. If that's the experience they want to have, then you can work your way back. So then what do we need to do? How do we need to act in order to make that experience come to life? So we call that a blueprint session, but it could simply be you stand around a whiteboard with your team in the kitchen and say, guys, just one day, let's talk about why are we doing what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe another day, just have a half hour or an hour discussion on, okay, what would be an identity for, it doesn't matter if you do logistics, you cook, you do, let's say, waiting, you're managing, what is connecting all of us? Because having that one job title is so crucial in building alignment amongst the team, because we're all the same, and you forget about white versus black. Like when I worked in the kitchen, I worked in a Michelin star restaurant, which was pretty strict, and I was part of the white brigade, and the black brigades always fucked it up. Pardon my French, but that was traditional, and it doesn't make sense anymore. We need to think we're one team.
Right. So you sort of flatline the structure more, which is very opposite to what traditionally the brigade, the kitchen brigade is constructed. So you destructure the not to have an anarchy in the kitchen, but we could use more softer skills and more flatline structure in kitchens. Is what is maybe something I could deduct from what you're saying, or?
I would agree. And in fact, you could go a step further, Ragnar, if you want. I don't know if you know, in Dubai, there's Rove Hotels, which is a revolutionary new hotel concept. It's similar to Citizen M hotels or Radisson Red or Me and All. But Rove is I think, a different class in terms of authenticity and culture. And with Rove Hotels, we only have 5 layers, but in fact, inverted the org chart. So you would have the roasters, which are on top, instead of your leaders be on top. You would have roasters, and then if you go down, you would go to coaches, head coach, hotel manager, and then you have a support team, which is quite different than. And we applied the same approach to address hotels, also in Dubai. And the cool part is that the first address hotel that converted had records in NPS and Net Promoter Score, so a huge increase in number of fans. The highest people happiness score, engagement score, breakthrough in occupancy. Because if you have ambassadors, and at address they were all called ambassadors, you're an ambassador to the brand, and coaches, head coach, hotel manager. Instead of 14 layers, we go back to 4, virtually speaking. And if you're inverting the org chart, you cannot supervise down anymore, you have to coach up. And then magic happens, because then you're suddenly empowering your front line to the max. And this is not, I would say, for every concept. It depends on your purpose. It depends on, of course, the quality of your staff. It depends on the region you operate. But you could, in various cases, go further and be surprised of the impact.
So reversing the pyramid, as we used to say in my back in the days when I was doing hospitality management. But reversing the pyramid, you cannot just reverse the pyramid if everybody isn't aligned with the purpose. I guess is back to the first part of the discussion.
Yeah, so true.
And I mean, is this, because we've been talking about that in hospitality, reversing the pyramid for some time. Is this something that you think is like even more important now? Have we a lot of big hotels and corporates were actually preaching that reversing the pyramid, and we are so and so, and yes I can sort of philosophy. Did they achieve what they wanted, and is this something that is even more important now? Talk about new generation Z and what have you.
Yeah, Jan Carlson, the former CEO of SAS Airlines, who started with the whole Yes I Can methodology, also instilled a culture of continuous improvement. And he wanted every individual to ask, how can we do better next time? And even if a passenger would say, no, it was all good. Oh, fantastic. Thank you for letting us know. But how can we do even better next time? So I think they got a long way in terms of continuous improvement, in terms of empowering the team. But at the same time, empowerment then was more like you could do service recovery. So if something went wrong, you're empowered to correct it. I think you need to go further than that. With true empowerment, you would basically hand over the keys of the restaurants, in a matter of speaking, to your team. If you look at culture is really what happens if the camera is not, let's say, turning. When you're not there, what happens? That's culture.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, nowadays with Gen Y, the millennials, and Gen Z becoming a more dominant factor. In 2025, we'll have 75% of the global workforce from those two generations. And they have, I'd say, a different mindset, different heart set, Ragnar. They want to belong to something meaningful, something bigger than just be the fastest growing or be the best in. You can be the best in, but if it's not relevant, who cares? So the experience we talked about, so we're growing from an experience society more to a purpose society. So where the experience needs to be consistently good, but ideally also becomes meaningful. So then the question is, are you allowing me to contribute? Do you recognize me for that contribution? Then I'm in. And that's, I think, a big shift since, let's say, the millennials entered about 20 years ago, the labor market. And mind you, 75% next year will be Gen Y, Gen Z. And what's cool, we're entering the era where for the first time in history, we have 5 generations in a workplace at the same time. Because boomers will keep working longer. Alpha generation, the first alpha generations to enter, it's just in a couple of years. So that's going to be cool. how that's all going to jive together. And I think as leaders, you nowadays have the responsibility not to manage anymore traditionally, but you need to lead, which means that you have to pick up the people where they are. And if I'm from a different generation with a different mindset and heart set, you as a leader need to adapt, unless you want to have an empty kitchen or an empty restaurant.
Right. Or a conflict, constant conflict. And so,
yes.
yeah. So leaders in the kitchen would need to become, facilitators of bringing the best out of others, and not necessarily the shining star being on the top of the pyramid. Is that like the what you would call a paradigm shift in the hotel restaurant industry?
It's a big shift, and a big shift that's happening. And I've seen more and more chefs who you enter into the kitchen and it's completely silent and everybody's working, focused, and makes beautiful, beautiful items. And then you recognize, okay, this is different than when I was in the kitchen. I can remember that working with a chef that would put, let's say, practitioners in the fridge if they fucked up something, which was like, oh my God, you cannot do that. But at the time, you got away with it. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's necessary anymore. And it will not simply be by star performers will not be accepted anymore. They will simply choose for another restaurant that treats you in a better way. And that's, to be fair, I think more and more leaders are aware that they have a responsibility, because people don't leave very often. They don't leave the restaurant, but they leave their leaders. So it's not the brands, but it's the leaders. And 70% of leaders, now statistic, think they're inspiring, and 82% of their team members fundamentally disagree.
Right.
So that's
right. So what you have to work on is the whole culture. But no, actually, what you're thinking back, what you say, the atmosphere in restaurants, and what you see more and more now is the open kitchen, and basically, or kitchen basically serving directly from the cooking station to the customers. So the kitchen stuff becomes the center point in delivering the experience. It's how a customer is going to feel is actually depending on the line cook now, what we call a line cook.
totally. And what I love already for decades is the front cooking, whereby, of course, you cannot put a line cook in a front cooking position without adapting the approach. So the experience you create as a front cook or in an open kitchen concept, I don't know if you know the concept called Soku, which is an amazing hospitality concept, also originated in Amsterdam. And they have an open kitchen front cooking, but with a beautiful experience. And I think that's where you need to behave differently. You're expected to deliver a different experience, and experience is a result of interaction. So if you want a different experience, it starts with different interaction, which calls for different leadership. That's again the reverse approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all that, Andre. And so so all that we've been talking about, this is a part of the Start Reverse, the services that you provide or the consulting you do, and so what type of consulting approach do you have? Is it for smaller companies as well, or only large corporates, or is it a sort of a long-term partnership, or do you do shorter workshops? How can people access you, and if they want to know more, and if they're thinking, well, I need to find those 5D steps approach, how can I get there?
I think startreverse.com will give a lot of answers. Our website, where you see the solutions, are split in, and a great question, tailor-made, which not everybody want to afford or can afford, but there's also turnkey. And if I go back in time, I was actually, true story, with my son in Bangkok, in a beautiful Swiss hotel. But we also visited other hotels like Novotel, Ibis. We had dinner in different restaurants. And then my son said, I mean, there's so much difference in restaurants and hotels. And I said, yes, that's true, but they're all part of the same group. And he didn't get that. And I said, you know, but it's actually what our core wants, as an example, like Marriott, like IHG, etc., is to be affordable for every price category or be available for every, let's say, purpose. If I go to Paris and I have 6 hours of sleep, I'm not going to pay 400 euros for a 5-star hotel. Then I'm perfectly fine with a 3-star solution as long as the room is comfortable. I think he got it. He swam away, and then I was thinking, we are only providing, let's say, Swiss hotel luxury currently. We need to be accessible also for single restaurants, for single stores. Hence, we built the Reverse Academy, which has an Experience Stars program, which is turnkey. You can actually look the videos, already view them on the website. That's why I decided to write the book and actually say, I want the whole reverse philosophy just to be available for free. So that's, if you want to look at the business model, Ragnar, if we meet, I can give you the book for those who are listening to the podcast. And if not, you can buy it, and then you have like a very low price access to the philosophy. If you want consultancy, we're happy to do so. If you want like the whole 5D journey, that's probably the bigger scope, but it's accessible for all. That's what I wanted to do. That's what we really insist on.
Yeah, no, I'd really recommend that. And so we will definitely put the links on the podcast page there, so people can have a look. I mean, it allows you to question yourself, me here sitting here in front of you, even my role and the purpose of World Chefs, and anybody who runs a professional association, as much applicable as in your kitchens or your hotels or whatever you are doing, actually. So so it's a very useful journey, and recommended. Now, yeah, sorry, André. No, yes. So no. So coming to the end of our podcast. So it was a really great pleasure to talk to you and just to get a sort of a little glimpse of what Start Reverse is, because it's a new concept. It was a new concept to me and probably for many of our listeners. And so we're looking forward to meeting you in Singapore and get some more insights, and then people can start digging through this and see how they can it can actually change their own approach to businesses. So
great to be here and happy to share what I'm not sure if I shared with you, but if I look at my family, 4 kids in hospitality, wife and me in hospitality. So I guess there's no way of escaping from hospitality, and just super happy to share. So thank you for having me.
thank you, André. See you soon in Singapore, and see you, all of you listeners, in Singapore in October. Get your tickets now. They're still on a very good offer. And thank you for listening to World on a Plate. I'm your host, Ragnar, and this is World Chefs Podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.